I'm joined by Sky News host Paul Murray, Sky News contributor Evelyn Ray, senior reporter Caroline Marcus and contributor Joe Hildebrand. Well, on Friday, Australia voted yes to a resolution supporting Palestine's push to become a full member of the United Nations. 143 countries voted in favour, 9 voted against and 25 abstained. Here was Penny Wong, Foreign Minister, yesterday.
This vote is not about whether Australia recognises Palestine. We will do that when we think the time is right. What we would say, and what I do say, is Australia no longer believes that recognition can only come at the end of a peace process. It could occur as part of a peace process.
Now, of course, Caroline, there was much discussion around whether or not you would have an abstention or an actual vote. I don't think it really would have made much difference whether you had an abstention or a vote, because an abstention is basically, well, we support it, we just don't want to be officially on the record as supporting it. But this rhetoric that, the acceptance can be part of the peace process, it's not at the end of the peace process. So all you've got to do to be accepted into the UN is go and commit some terrorist acts, it would seem.
Yeah, commit the worst massacre against Jews since the Holocaust. And here you go, here's membership, please come in, red carpet rolled out. I mean, this is disgusting. And I do disagree with you. I think there is a massive difference just on surface level, just in terms of a gesture, in terms of an abstention vote, so to speak, or...
But we all know what it means if they abstain.
It's ultimately going to be vetoed anyway, so this was always an exercise in virtue signalling. Neither vote means anything 100%. In practical terms. It means a world of difference to the relationship between Israel and Australia, which has already been on very thin ice ever since our first response from the Foreign Minister was to urge restraint right after Israel had suffered its worst ever terrorist attack. That already put us in the bad books with what is our number one ally in the Middle East and should be a huge ally to any Western country or anyone who believes in democracy and Western civilization. This is just another nail in the coffin between the relationship between Australia and Israel.
What do you think, Paul, is the purpose of Australia voting for it?
Having it both ways. I mean, you have the opportunity for centre-left governments, and there's a lot of pressure on centre-left governments from their younger voters, and I'll explain a poll about Biden a little bit later about that. But when this was essentially not membership, it was about greater access to the system of the United Nations, but you know that it's going to be vetoed at another point in time, you're able to say back to that group of people that are demanding action and demanding recognition, oh, look, we did something, but unless you're willing to argue it a little more, wholeheartedly or deep-throatedly, then you're not all that in on it. The suggestion being that, Penny Wong is the one playing, 4D chess here. Australia and its relationship, particularly with Israel, vitally important. But the idea that Australia is going to be the solution to the problem between Palestine and Israel is pulling our leg a little.
Yes, and it's pretty clear that in the back of the heads of Penny Wong and certainly many other members of this federal government, Evelyn, is the fact that they have large Muslim populations in their electorates. And they have to be seen, whether or not they actually believe it, to be pandering to them to some degree. You saw Jason Clare, I think it was last week, the Education Minister, was asked, is calling for intifada and saying from the river to the sea, incitement to violence, essentially. And his seat in Western Sydney has a Muslim population of about 27%. And his response was, well, it means different things to different people. I mean, the bet each way that they're having on this issue, it should be pretty simple. Whatever you think of Israel, it is the only democracy in the Middle East. And in any case, defending democracy should be our number one priority, not pandering to a minority group because we think it'll win us votes on the back of supporting terrorists.
I think majority of our politics in this country and unfortunately around the West is exactly what you said, Caroline, virtue signalling. I think that's kind of all this was. It lacks conviction, it lacks honesty. I think that the number one responsibility for our government in Australia is to not sow division, especially on our soil here, and especially to not meddle unnecessarily and try and, have some arrogance of control, I guess, in other nations. And I think that this has achieved nothing but further division, unfortunately, in our country for something that means little. And to be honest, I think the elephant in the room here is I honestly think that Australia shouldn't even be in the UN. I don't think we should be in this globalist one government agenda 2030 nonsense. And on top of that, you would think that the Palestinian supporters would first and foremost go, surely being part of the UN is more of a punishment than a reward. I mean, I just think the whole thing is laughable. I think Australian politics has been incredibly laughable lately. We're pointing the finger at big tech in America and saying, we're going to legislate you, Twitter, X, whatever, and now we're trying to get involved in things that, like you mentioned, is just embarrassing.
Well, don't forget that Saudi Arabia was put in charge of the UN Human Rights Council there for a little while as well, so we know how the UN operates. But what does it mean for the broader Palestine issue for the government now? I mean, you know, we know what way Penny Wong was leaning, but it's officially on the record now.
There's a few things. One is I think that Anthony Albanese, he's a very loyal person and he values Penny Wong very highly, and I think he's basically outsourced most of this to her, and I think this is definitely her call. I think one of the big problems is that this government never really had a particularly strong or well thought out strategic position on Israel and Palestine to start with. And let's not forget that for most of the world, nobody saw this coming, even the Israelis. No one thought.
I doubt that.
No one thought. No, it's absolutely true. No one thought that. You know, like Hamas and the Israelis were trading rocks, trading little rockets, you know, back and forth over this border. I've been there. No, the sense of, there was no sense of alarm. There was no sense of an imminent threat. Of course, people knew that there were fire alarms rocket alarms would go off and the dome of steel would go off and away you'd go. There was a real sense of normality, and that was just a year before this happened.